So obviously with Leon Edwards losing in such disappointing fashion last week against Sean Brady, there's been a bit of a pile on him in the media, which is understandable. It was a really poor performance. His last two fights, he's looked far from his best. But I wanted to kind of look at it from a slightly different angle and see what he's actually missing as a fighter, despite being, well, one of the best welterweights we've seen in the last decade. Now, a really good MMA account that I follow on Instagram called MMA Theory put this very well. Like, Leon Edwards is technically nearly perfect. If you sent him to do a seminar or demonstrate certain techniques on a video, it's genuinely close to perfection when it comes to mixed martial arts. You know, if you ask him to throw a jab, a head kick, do certain takedowns, do certain skills in BJJ, things like this, it is all picture perfect. But the one thing that he has always lacked is a mastery of the intangibles in fighting. And it made me think, who's someone who can actually dominate this side of fighting? And it's Dricus du Plessis, and he's actually the complete contrast to Leon Edwards. Now, the more I looked into the differences between these two guys as fighters, despite both of their relevant successes, the more obvious that it became these guys are on completely different ends of the spectrum in almost everything to do with fighting. On one hand, you've got Leon, who looks aesthetically perfect in a lot of the things that he does, you know, his kicks, his feints, his combinations at times, when he chooses to throw them at least. And then you've got Dricus, who, you know, charges forward with a very kind of head up, hands flailing fashion. Obviously it works. I think Dricus is an amazing fighter for that point. But then you've also got Leon, who, without fail, in each of his last maybe 4, 5, 6 fights, he's almost found a way to make himself lose from winning positions. Now, these examples, you can go back to the Nate Diaz fight 4 years ago. He was winning that whole fight dominantly, and then Diaz tags him with a left hand with a minute to go, and Leon looked like he could have pissed away 24 minutes of perfect work just because of one lapse of concentration. Then you go to his next fight, which I believe was against Usman for the belt. He was losing the entire one and pulled out that wonder head kick. That was, I mean, the only instance where I've really seen Leon manage to pull something out of absolutely nowhere. Now, for their trilogy fight in London, which I was fortunate enough to be at, Leon was clearly the better fighter. He came in really dialed in with a great game plan. It's probably the best he's ever performed, all considered. But he had a cage grab, which meant a point was deducted, which could have really swayed the scorecards. And it made it a lot more of a sketchy experience than it really should have been. Now, you look at the Colby fight a year and a half ago. Colby was absolutely shot, as we saw in his last performance against Buckley. But Leon still managed to take himself into areas where he really didn't need to. Like, he went for a triangle armbar in, I think, the last round, and it ended up with Colby almost taking his back. And Colby is far from his best at the moment, but a slightly fresher version of the same fighter might have done something there. And then obviously against Bilal Muhammad, he just never got going. But then in the last round, when, you know, he could really tell that the stakes were high and, you know, you needed to pull a finish out of nowhere, he managed to land some beautiful elbows and really damage him. It just showed, why didn't you just lock in a little bit sooner? And then against Sean Brady, he was getting bullied, both tactically, mentally. He didn't look in there, and physically. And then in the third round, decides to shoot a takedown on the guy who's probably the best grappler in the division right now. Obviously ends up getting completely wrecked on the ground, culminating in a finish in the next one. Now, if you look at Dricus du Plessis by contrast, he's one of those fighters who just manages to come out on top in areas of the fight where he really shouldn't have as big an advantage as he ends up having. Against Darren Till, there were points in that fight where he looked completely technically outclassed, but he just managed to dog his way through it. Against Derek Brunson, which is one of the sloppiest looking fights ever, but he dogged his way through it. He managed to outlast his opponent. Who was it next? Against Robert Whittaker. This was gutting for me. I love Robert Whittaker, but he just managed to like bully him. Robert Whittaker is one of the most technically proficient middleweights we've ever seen in his all-round game. But Dricus kind of took him down with some weird head and arm throw and just started landing shots and just kind of made it dirty, made it dogged, culminating in their finish in the second round. When he fought, who was it, Strickland, again, managed to dog his way through it. Leon Edwards just doesn't have this dog in him. Now, what I found interesting is that you look at Dricus du Plessis, he, I think, came from a relatively wealthy family in South Africa, went to university. Leon Edwards, by contrast, comes from, you know, Jamaica. His father was murdered when he was younger, lived in some really horrible conditions growing up, apparently. You'd expect the doggedness to be coming more from Leon Edwards' side than Dricus' side due to the trials and tribulations he's gone through. But it just doesn't seem to be there, and it makes no sense to me. Anyway, if you've made it this far, thank you for watching. Let me know in the comments what you think about that. Cheers.